it seems to me for about, I don't know, last 30 or 40 years, we saw a lot of like centrist, kind of, for lack of a better word, like neoliberal Democrats running the administration of higher ed. And I think they used a lot of DEI language to justify corporate policies that left a lot of
Yep.
people angered and frustrated with the university. And I think that kind of ceded some ground where conservatives have some substantive critiques mixed with a bunch of nonsense. But it's the other flip side of that coin. Before Republicans get excited for what I said, is that today it seems like, Robin, you're describing just what kind of liberals did with using DEI to deconstruct higher ed as we know it. It seems like conservatives are doing a version of that with the anti-Semitism agenda. It's not really about combating anti-Semitism. Like, I would argue a lot of the corporate DEI policies were not really about advancing DEI.
Right.
Steve, you want to jump
No,
in?
their notion of anti-Semitism is highly controversial, and it's the one that was part of that Trump declared in an executive order in his first term. Right? He made an executive order on anti-Semitism, and he embraced a definition of anti-Semitism that is highly contentious, and most Jews in America would reject, which suggests that any criticism of Israel is, by definition, anti-Semitic. Most Jews in America are to the left of on the political spectrum, and they would reject categorically the idea that any criticism of Israel is, now they may be supporting Israel in this current conflict with Gaza for whatever reason, but they would reject that definition of anti-Semitism, and that is the one that the Homeland Security and so on is trying to enforce by stripping these graduate students and students who are here on student visas of their student visas. It is, it's kind of ridiculous. But I want to get back to something that you mentioned, Nolan, which is something I agree with. I think there has been, for at least a couple of decades, an enormous amount of frustration with colleges and universities. But I actually think it doesn't really have much to do with DEI. I think the frustration with colleges and universities is over the rising cost of higher education. And this has everything to do with the divestment, right, by both the federal government, but especially because most higher ed institutions, most public higher ed institutions are funded by state funds, especially at the state level. The subsidy for higher education, which used to be embraced as a bipartisan issue, right? Republicans and Democrats both understood that this had broad benefits for society to fund the kind of research and teaching that goes on in universities, had broad benefits for society. And once the neoliberal, the neoliberal ideology took hold at the state level, they decided, oh, we're going to push the cost of education off onto the individual student and their families. We're going to cut back on the subsidy that we provide. And that led to a couple of things. First, the increase in tuition costs has spiraled out of control and has made it, higher ed, increasingly unaffordable for working class students in particular. And second, it created this student loan crisis where instead of having grants and scholarships that students having grants and scholarships they could use to go to college, they had to rely on federally guaranteed student loans and had to go deeply and deeply in debt. And of course, we saw the outcry from people who had become incredibly indebted during the Occupy movement, right? When the banks on Wall Street got bailed out, but students who were holding, tens of millions, tens and hundreds, billions of dollars in student loans got no relief.
Hey detoxers. Thanks for tuning in. You can find Disinfo Detox on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Every click helps grow the community and keeps those tech overlords happy. Detox complete.